Jagmeet Singh, good to see you again.
Good seeing you
Thanks for stopping by. What's your reaction to this budget?
Well, there's some things that I'm encouraged by. I think it's really positive to see that the government has taken steps on pay equity. That's a very important measure. But there's no financing associated with implementing pay equity, which to me is a big problem. If we want to see it actually implemented, there need to be some financing associated with it. There's some positive steps with regards to the First Nations, particularly massive issues facing child welfare. So that was a positive step forward. I think the government's actually made a pretty significant investment there. I'm not sure it actually covers the gap that exists, but it is a significant investment, so I can acknowledge that. The problem that I have is when it comes to boil water advisories, the government is far short of the investments needed to address the massive issue of access to clean drinking water in the reserves. That's still going to be a problem given the government's commitment is far short of what's needed. But the biggest problem here is this budget does not address the growing income inequality that we see in our society. We proposed two key solutions. We talked about closing the tax loopholes and using the revenue on these massive tax loopholes on the rich to invest in something like Pharma Care and actually invest in it, put some dollars behind it.
And look what we saw today. As you said a couple of weeks ago, this was, it sounded like you were unveiling a signature plank in an NDP campaign platform, Pharma Care.
That's right.
The government comes out in this budget today, the finance minister, and says setting up an advisory panel to look at a national Pharma Care system. You don't buy it?
Well, one, there's no financing for an actual Pharma Care plan. There's not even any financing for the study itself. So they seem to have just tacked it on at the end without any financing. My commitment is...
You think they stole your idea if you say they tacked it on at the end?
Well,
you don't think it was in the budget a couple of weeks ago until you started talking about it?
I don't think they had it in their budget if they don't have any money associated with it. That's problematic. But more importantly, Canadians need Pharma Care now. Canadians are struggling. We just heard the report last month from UBC, University of British Columbia, where 1.6 million Canadians are either skipping dosages or just doing without the prescription medication they need. That's troubling to me. In a country as rich as ours, we need to implement national Pharma Care. This government has not taken any concrete step towards actually implementing national Pharma Care. That's troubling to me.
Well, you talked about Pharma Care as, I'm sure, is something you think would set the NDP apart from the government when you talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Does it so much now? They're talking Pharma Care, you were talking Pharma Care. Who owns Pharma Care now?
Well, I mean, the people of Canada own Pharma Care and they deserve to have Pharma Care. More importantly, this government's not actually talking about implementing national Pharma Care. They're talking about a study with no funding. That's not what Canadians need. Canadians right now need a concrete step towards implementing Pharma Care,
but
like what we proposed.
Let me challenge that. What would a Pharma Care plan look like?
We proposed a solution. Our critic from Vancouver proposed a motion to say, let's get the discussion going, let's meet with provinces and get the discussion rolling to how we would implement national Pharma Care. The government voted against that motion. That shows they're not committed to taking a concrete step. That would be a step. Let's meet with the provinces and say, okay, let's talk about implementing Pharma Care. Let's look at it. Let's put some financing behind it.
Well, but that's what's going to happen with this advisory panel.
Well, they're going to go ahead and no funding behind it. There's no fund, not even a single dollar behind the study. It doesn't show a commitment to addressing this problem.
I guess the point is, don't you need to go do some work on what the option is that you decide to pick before you just implement Pharma Care?
Well, we've got study after...
If you were, like, you can't implement it tomorrow, can you?
Well, we've got study after study that shows that we need it. Study after study shows how we can do it. But more importantly, this government hasn't put any financing behind it. How can you make a commitment without any actual way to implement that commitment? Even if it's just a study, they haven't put any dollars behind it. It's not a commitment. We want to see a commitment to actually taking the steps to get Pharma Care in action. This government hasn't done that.
They do trumpet in the budget the notion that they are taking on tax cheats and going after tax havens. Clearly, you don't believe they're going far enough.
Not at all. What they're talking about, the estimates are it's going to raise $70 million a year. We know that there's billions of dollars that are going to offshore tax havens that are being lost to tax loopholes and to inclusion rates that are not just. We talked about closing those loopholes in a concrete way to generate massive revenues. That's what we need to see happen, not this timid, paltry example of what steps can be taken. Your
party's been pushing for years on pay equity. This budget talks about a framework to start down the road of looking at how to achieve pay equity, at least in federally regulated workplaces that affect 1.2 million Canadian workers. Do you like what you heard about pay equity, or again, is that words and problems with a plan?
No, that's a concrete step. I think they've talked about that in a positive way, and that's something that I've said off the top of my speech today, that's a positive step. Again, there wasn't financing associated with the pay equity implementation. There needs to be some financing, again, associated with it, but it is a concrete thing that they've said that they're going to implement pay equity, but to me it's problematic. Anytime you make a promise without backing it up with some funding, it's always going to take some funding to implement anything. So if you're serious about implementing something as important as pay equity, there needs to be financing, and the government could do better.
You like the parental leave measures they talked about today?
That's a strong measure. That's important because what it does is it addresses this inequality that exists where one partner takes leave and the other one doesn't. This is actually a very positive step towards ensuring that women are encouraged to be in the workforce and supported in the workforce. That's a good measure.
All right, Jagmeet Singh, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming by.
My pleasure.